My parents skipped my wedding for my sister's luxury cruise. Months later, they demanded I attend her extravagant big day, so I booked a flight out and said, "Enjoy your drama without me." People always say that blood is thicker than water. They tell you that family is everything, that your parents and siblings are the only ones who will truly have your back when the chips are down. For a long time, I actually believed that. I spent 32 years of my life bending over backward, shrinking myself down and swallowing my own needs just to keep the peace in my family. My name is Nolan, and I am the classic middle child. But it goes a little deeper than that. In the psychology world, they have a term for kids like me. They call us glass children. We are the ones who are seen right through, the ones whose needs are completely invisible because someone else in the family takes up all the oxygen in the room. In my family, that oxygen thief was my younger sister, Peyton. Peyton is 27 now, but she has been the center of the universe since the day she was born. She was the unexpected miracle baby, the little princess who could do no wrong. If Peyton wanted something, the earth had to stop spinning to make it happen. Then there was my older brother, Julian. He is 36, the firstborn, the heir to the family name, and the golden boy who is always celebrated for just breathing. And then there was me. The buffer. The peacekeeper. The guy who was expected to be highly flexible and completely low maintenance. I remember my high school graduation like it was yesterday. It was supposed to be a big deal. I had worked incredibly hard, maintained a great grade point average, and even landed a solid scholarship for college. My parents had promised to take me out for a nice steak dinner afterward to celebrate. But 2 weeks before the ceremony, Peyton, who was 13 at the time, decided she absolutely had to see her favorite pop star perform. The catch was that the concert was 3 states away, and it fell on the exact same weekend as my graduation. You can probably guess what happened. My parents did not even hesitate. They bought the concert tickets, booked a hotel, and packed up the car. They told me they were so incredibly proud of me, but Peyton had been crying for days, and they just could not bear to break her heart. They handed me $50, told me to order a nice pizza, and drove off. I walked across that stage to accept my diploma, looking out at a sea of cheering families, knowing perfectly well that mine was hundreds of miles away buying overpriced concert merchandise. I went home that night, ate cold pizza by myself, and told myself it was fine. That was just how my family operated. I was supposed to be the understanding one. That pattern continued into my adult life. Whenever there was a holiday, a birthday, or a family gathering, the schedule revolved entirely around Peyton's social life and Julian's career. I just learned to adapt. I told myself it wasn't malicious. I convinced myself that my parents loved me just as much, but that my siblings just needed more attention. I made excuses for them for decades. It took meeting the love of my life to finally realize how incredibly messed up that dynamic was. Her name is Hazel. We met 5 years ago at a tiny, overcrowded coffee shop downtown, and from the moment we started talking, my entire world shifted. Hazel is 28, and she is everything I am not. She is fiercely protective, deeply empathetic, and she has this incredible ability to see right through people's nonsense. More importantly, she actually saw me. Not the accommodating middle child, not the peacekeeper, but just me. When Hazel brought me home to meet her family for the first time, it was a massive culture shock. Her parents actually asked for my opinion on things. They listened when I spoke. If we made plans to have dinner at 6 o'clock, they were there at 6 o'clock. Nobody demanded that the schedule be rearranged at the last second because someone else had a minor inconvenience. They treated me like a human being whose time and presence had value. It was a completely foreign concept to me. After 5 years of building a beautiful, quiet life together, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I wanted to spend the rest of my days with her. I proposed at that same little coffee shop where we first bumped into each other. It was simple, intimate, and perfect. She cried, I teared up, and she said yes. We were over the moon. Almost immediately, we started talking about wedding dates. We did not want to rush, but we also did not want a long, drawn-out engagement. We looked at the calendar and realized that the exact anniversary of the day we met fell on a Saturday the following year. It was roughly 10 months away. It felt like fate. That specific date held so much emotional weight for us, and getting married on it just felt meant to be. We locked it in. We put down a hefty deposit on a gorgeous outdoor venue overlooking a lake, hired a caterer, and started drafting the guest list. 10 months is a lot of notice. In the wedding world, that is more than enough time for people to mark their calendars and request time off work. We announced the date at a Sunday family dinner at my parents' house. I was actually nervous, but to my surprise, the initial reaction was overwhelmingly positive. My mom immediately started asking about color schemes and floral arrangements. My dad clapped me on the back and joked that he needed at least 6 months to write a speech that would make everyone cry. Julian asked if there was going to be an open bar, and Peyton squealed, saying she could not wait to go dress shopping. For a brief, fleeting moment, I felt like a priority. I felt like they were genuinely happy for me and ready to show up for my big day. We sent out the save the date cards the very next week. Everyone had them. Everyone knew the plan. The venue was booked, the date was set in stone, and the countdown had officially begun. I honestly thought, for the first time in my life, things were going to go smoothly. I should have known better. 6 months went by. We were exactly 4 months away from the wedding. Invitations were being finalized, the menu was set, and Hazel had already found her dream dress. We were in the thick of the planning, and we were so excited. Then came another routine Sunday dinner at my parents' house. We were all sitting around the dining room table, passing plates of roast chicken and potatoes, when Peyton casually cleared her throat. She had this specific look on her face, the one she always gets right before she demands the entire room cater to her. She took a sip of her wine and announced, entirely too casually, that she had some bad news about the wedding. She told me that she and her old sorority sisters had been talking, and they finally decided to book their big reunion trip. She smiled and said they had secured spots on an exclusive luxury VIP cruise going through the Caribbean. I smiled back, completely confused, and asked her what that had to do with my wedding. She rolled her eyes like I was the idiot in the room. She sighed and said that the only week the cruise line had available for their VIP package was the exact same week of my wedding. The ship was setting sail on the Thursday before my wedding and returning the following Wednesday. Therefore, she said, she would not be able to attend my wedding. The table went dead silent. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. I waited for her to laugh and say she was just messing with me. But she didn't. She just went back to eating her chicken. I asked her if she was joking. I reminded her that she had known my wedding date for 6 months. I told her that she literally had the save the date card pinned to the corkboard in her kitchen. Peyton immediately got defensive. Her voice went up an octave. She argued that she and her friends had been trying to align their schedules for 3 years, and this was the only window that worked for all 7 of them. She said she had already paid a $2,000 non-refundable deposit. She looked at me with this mix of annoyance and victimhood and said it was not a big deal and that I should understand. Before I could even process the sheer audacity of her statement, Julian chimed in. He set his fork down, wiped his mouth, and said that actually, he had a scheduling conflict too. He explained that his corporate office was hosting a highly exclusive networking retreat at a high-end golf resort that exact same weekend. He said it was a prime opportunity to rub shoulders with the senior partners, and that missing it could really hurt his chances for a promotion next year. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at my mother and father, fully expecting them to step in. I expected them to tell my sister and brother that they were being ridiculous, that a family wedding takes precedence over a girls' trip and a golf weekend. Instead, my mother looked down at her plate, awkwardly rearranging her peas. My dad cleared his throat and muttered something about how it was a really busy time of year for everybody. Right then and there, the illusion shattered. My wedding was not a priority. To my family, my wedding was just an optional social event, something they would attend only if they didn't have anything better to do. Peyton was choosing bottomless margaritas on a boat over watching her brother get married. Julian was choosing golf carts and corporate handshakes over standing by my side. And my parents were letting them do it. I did not yell. I did not flip the table. I just quietly put my napkin down, told Hazel it was time to go, and walked out the front door. The drive home that night was excruciatingly quiet. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were completely white. For the first 20 minutes, I didn't say a word. My brain was reverting back to its factory settings, running the same old script I had been running since I was a kid. I started rationalizing it out loud. I told Hazel that maybe we could push the wedding back a month. I said that the venue probably had some openings in the fall. I argued that Peyton would lose a lot of money if she canceled her cruise, and Julian really did need that promotion. I was actually sitting there, twisting myself into a pretzel, trying to figure out how to dismantle the most important day of my life so my sister could get a tan and my brother could play golf. Hazel put her hand on my arm. She looked at me with a firmness I had rarely seen and stopped me right in my tracks. She told me that I was not a background character in my own life. She reminded me that we chose this specific date because it meant something deeply personal to us. She said that if we moved the wedding to accommodate a vacation, we would be sending a message to my family that they could treat us like an afterthought for the rest of our marriage. She was 100% right. Her words snapped me out of the fog of guilt. The next day, the real manipulation began. My phone rang, and it was my mother. She did not call to apologize for my siblings. She called to manage the situation. Her voice was dripping with that sweet, overly concerned tone she uses when she wants to control a narrative. She started by saying how stressed Peyton was. She told me Peyton had been crying all morning because she felt like she was being forced to choose between her lifelong friends and her brother. Then, my mother made the pitch. She gently suggested that Hazel and I explore a compromise. She said it would be a shame for the family to be divided on such a happy occasion. I told her plainly that there was no compromise. The venue was paid for, the vendors were locked in, and the date was not moving. That is when my mother shifted from sweet to transactional. She sighed heavily and said she understood that deposits were an issue. Then she offered to write me a check. She literally offered to pay the venue cancellation fees and cover whatever financial penalties we incurred, just so we could pick a new date that fit Peyton's cruise schedule. I felt physically sick. She was treating my wedding like a dental appointment that needed to be rescheduled. She was willing to throw thousands of dollars at the problem just so her golden child would not have to face the consequences of being selfish. I told my mother that my wedding day was not for sale, and I hung up the phone. I was shaking. The audacity was just beyond anything I had ever experienced. If my mother's attempt at bribery was insulting, my brother Julian's approach was downright maddening. Julian has always viewed relationships through the lens of a corporate balance sheet. To him, everything is a transaction, and every interaction is about leverage. 2 days after the disastrous Sunday dinner, I got a massive, multi-paragraph email from him. He did not call or text. He sent an email, treating the situation like a corporate dispute. I opened it and read it with Hazel looking over my shoulder. Julian started by stating that he wanted to clear the air and approach this logically. He explained, in agonizing detail, how critical this specific golf retreat was for his career trajectory. He listed the names of the senior executives who would be there, making sure I understood just how important he was in the corporate hierarchy. Then came the absolute craziest part. Julian wrote that he really did want to be a supportive older brother, but attending my wedding would cause him significant financial and professional damage. He stated that if I absolutely insisted on him being there, the only logistical way he could make it work was to fly out from the golf resort on a private chartered flight on Saturday morning, attend the ceremony, and fly back that same night. He then boldly suggested that, since it was my stubbornness regarding the date that was causing this conflict, I should be the one to cover the cost of his expedited travel. He actually attached an estimated invoice for the charter flights, which totaled nearly $4,000. He wrapped up the email by saying that if I was not willing to invest in his attendance, I had no right to be upset if he stayed at the retreat. I sat there staring at the screen, my brain struggling to comprehend the sheer level of entitlement. My brother was holding his presence at my wedding hostage and demanding a $4,000 ransom. He was gaslighting me into believing that my refusal to pay for his luxury travel made me the bad guy. I did not type out a long, emotional response. I did not try to argue with his warped logic. I simply hit reply and typed 2 sentences. I told him I would not be paying a single dime for his travel and that I hoped he had a great time playing golf. That was the moment my relationship with my brother permanently changed. I realized he did not view me as a brother to be celebrated. He viewed me as a financial burden to be managed. Hazel just shook her head in disbelief. We were officially watching the family unravel, and we hadn't even sent the formal invitations yet. By the end of the week, I had made my boundaries incredibly clear. I was not changing the date, I was not accepting my parents' hush money, and I was not paying for Julian's private flights. I assumed that would be the end of it. I figured they would just quietly RSVP no, and we would all move on with our lives in awkward, tense silence. But my family does not do quiet. When they realize they cannot control you behind closed doors, they try to control how the rest of the world sees you. The social media smear campaign began on a Tuesday. My mother posted a massive, highly dramatic status update on her Facebook page. She did not use my name, but she made sure every single relative, family friend, and neighbor knew exactly who she was talking about. She wrote a long, agonizing paragraph about how modern values have ruined traditional families. She talked about the heartbreak of watching a child turn their back on compromise. She used phrases like, "Stubborn pride destroys unbreakable bonds," and "It is a shame when people allow a single day of celebration to tear apart decades of loyalty." She painted herself as the weeping matriarch trying desperately to hold her fractured family together against the cruelty of her unreasonable son. Peyton was right there in the comments, adding fuel to the fire. She posted broken heart emojis and wrote things about how she was praying for the family's healing. She acted as if I had burned her house down, rather than simply refusing to cancel my wedding for her cruise. The flying monkeys descended almost immediately. That is what people call the extended relatives who get weaponized in family disputes. My phone started blowing up with text messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins. Some were genuinely confused, asking if the wedding was canceled. Others were incredibly judgmental, telling me that I needed to stop being difficult and just make peace with my mother. Aunt after aunt told me that I would understand when I had kids of my own, telling me that family should always come first. I realized how brilliantly my mother had spun the story. She never mentioned that Peyton was skipping the wedding for a Caribbean cruise. She never mentioned Julian's golf trip. She just told everyone that I was being inflexible and cruel. The final straw came when my dad finally called me. I thought maybe, just maybe, he was calling to apologize for my mother's public meltdown. But no. His voice was quiet, hesitant, and entirely spineless. He sighed and told me that the stress of the wedding planning was causing my mother a lot of health issues. He said that the tension in the house was unbearable and Peyton was a wreck. Then he delivered the final blow. He said that given how hostile things had become, he and my mother were seriously debating whether or not they should even attend the wedding. He claimed they did not want to bring negative energy to my special day, framing their absence as a favor to me. They were punishing me. Because I refused to bow down, they were withdrawing the one thing parents are supposed to give unconditionally, their presence. I told my dad to do whatever he felt was right, and I hung up. If you are enjoying this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the city you are living in. Every comment helps the video reach more people. Thank you so much. The morning of my wedding finally arrived. I woke up before the sun even started to rise. The house was completely silent, except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest bedroom, slowly buttoning my white shirt and adjusting my dark tie. I looked at my reflection, trying to process the magnitude of the day. This was supposed to be the happiest morning of my life. I was about to marry Hazel, the woman who had brought so much light and sanity into my world. But sitting right there, heavy in the pit of my stomach, was a cold, hard knot of anxiety. My phone vibrated on the wooden dresser. The screen lit up in the dim room. It was a text from one of my older cousins who always kept an ear to the ground. He did not mince words. He just sent a short message saying he wanted to give me a heads up before I got to the venue. My parents, Peyton, and Julian were officially not coming. There was no last-minute change of heart. There was no sudden realization of how awful they were being. They had packed their bags, Peyton had boarded her cruise ship, Julian was at his golf resort, and my parents were sitting at home, stubbornly holding their ground. I read the text twice. I put the phone down, took a deep breath, and let it out slowly. Honestly, I thought I would break down. I thought I would feel this crushing wave of grief and start throwing things. But I didn't. Instead, I felt something completely different. I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. It was as if a massive, suffocating weight had just been lifted off my chest. For the first time in 32 years, I did not have to wait around hoping my family would choose me. The waiting was over. The worst-case scenario had happened, and I was still standing. I finished getting dressed and walked out into the living room. Hazel's family had rented a large house for the weekend, and the place was already buzzing with activity. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air. Hazel's father was standing by the kitchen island, already dressed in his sharp tuxedo. When he saw me, his eyes immediately watered up. He walked over, wrapped me in a massive bear hug, and slapped my back. He told me how proud he was to officially call me his son. He did not ask about my parents. He did not bring up the drama. He just looked at me with genuine love and told me that today was going to be perfect. That was the contrast that truly broke me, but in a good way. In one corner, I had my biological family, punishing me for not catering to their selfish whims. In the other corner, I had Hazel's family, stepping up and embracing me without any conditions or strings attached. I wiped my eyes, grabbed a cup of coffee, and smiled. I was ready to get married. The venue looked absolutely breathtaking. The sun was shining over the lake, the chairs were perfectly lined up on the grass, and a string quartet was playing softly in the background. As I stood at the altar waiting for the ceremony to begin, I let my eyes scan the crowd. It was a beautiful turnout. Our friends, Hazel's massive extended family, and several of my cousins and uncles were seated and smiling. But my eyes inevitably locked onto the front row on my side of the aisle. There were 3 pristine, white wooden chairs sitting completely empty. They even had little reserved tags on them with my parents' and siblings' names. I had deliberately told the wedding planner not to remove them. I wanted everyone to see exactly what my family had chosen to do. I wanted the empty chairs to speak for themselves. Just as the music shifted to signal the bridal procession, there was a slight commotion near the back row. I looked past the crowd and saw my Aunt Vivian rushing in, clutching her purse. Aunt Vivian is my mother's older sister, and they have always had a complicated relationship because Vivian refuses to put up with my mother's nonsense. She caught my eye, gave me a fierce, determined nod, and quietly slipped into a seat in the back row. Later, she would pull me aside and tell me that my mother had ordered the entire extended family to boycott the wedding in solidarity. Aunt Vivian had told her to go to hell. Then, the doors opened, and Hazel walked down the aisle. The second I saw her, the empty chairs vanished from my mind. The family drama evaporated. It was just her and me. We exchanged our vows, we cried, we laughed, and we promised to choose each other every single day for the rest of our lives. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the crowd erupted into cheers. We walked back down the aisle holding hands, entirely surrounded by people who genuinely wanted to celebrate us. The reception was incredible. The food was fantastic, the speeches from Hazel's dad and my best man were hilarious and touching, and the dance floor was packed. About halfway through the evening, one of my uncles walked up to me. He looked deeply uncomfortable. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and handed me a thick, white envelope. He quietly said that my father had dropped it off at his house the night before and asked him to deliver it to me. I took the envelope and walked over to a quiet corner near the bar. I tore it open. Inside was a cashier's check for $500, folded inside a piece of heavy cardstock. There was no congratulations. There was no apology. Just a single sentence written in my mother's unmistakable cursive handwriting. It read, "We hope you learn the value of family someday." It was the ultimate passive-aggressive parting shot. Even on my wedding day, they could not let it go. They had to try and inject their poison into my happiness. I looked at the note, let out a short laugh, and slid both the check and the card into my jacket pocket. Hazel walked up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist. She saw the envelope and instantly knew. She did not ask what it said. She just took my hand, looked me dead in the eyes, and asked if I was ready to go cut the cake. I smiled, nodded, and left the envelope in my pocket. They were not going to steal a single second of my joy. The very next morning, Hazel and I headed to the airport. We had booked a 2-week honeymoon at a remote, all-inclusive luxury resort in the Caribbean. We had deliberately kept the destination a total secret from my side of the family. Given how chaotic the last few months had been, we did not want anyone knowing where we were. When we finally arrived at our beautiful oceanfront villa, the very first thing we did was take our cell phones, turn them completely off, and lock them inside the hotel room safe. We decided we were going off the grid. No emails, no texts, no social media, and absolutely no family drama. For 3 glorious days, we drank frozen cocktails on the beach, swam in crystal clear water, and ate incredible seafood. It was paradise. It was the absolute peace and quiet we had been desperately craving. On the morning of the 4th day, I needed to check my phone. There was a tropical storm system moving through the area, and I wanted to pull up the local weather radar to see if our boat tour was going to be canceled. I unlocked the safe, took out my phone, and held the power button. The second the phone connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, it practically vibrated out of my hand. The notifications started flooding the screen like a waterfall. Ding after ding after ding. There were dozens of missed calls, over 50 unread text messages, and countless notifications from Facebook and Instagram. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the family group chat. It was an absolute war zone. While Hazel and I had been sipping margaritas, my family had been spiraling out of control. My mother was having a full-blown meltdown. She had found out that Aunt Vivian and several other relatives had attended the wedding, and she was furious. She was sending massive paragraphs into the group chat, publicly shaming them, calling them traitors, and accusing them of encouraging my disrespectful behavior. Then there was Peyton. Peyton had apparently been monitoring the social media posts from our wedding guests. Seeing everyone having an incredible time without her must have triggered her victim complex. She posted a tearful video on her Instagram story from her cruise ship balcony. She did not look like she was having fun on her luxury VIP trip. Instead, she was crying about how deeply hurt she was that her own brother had gone on his honeymoon without even telling his family where he was going. She claimed she was terrified something bad had happened to me. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Julian had chimed in too, sending a text directly to me, stating that I was acting incredibly immature by ignoring my mother's calls, and that I needed to call home immediately to fix the mess I had created. I sat there, looking at the screen, feeling absolutely nothing but exhaustion. They were literally thousands of miles away, and they were still trying to dictate my emotional state. Hazel sat next to me, resting her head on my shoulder, reading the messages. She didn't say a word. She just waited to see what I would do. I opened the group chat. I did not type out a long defense. I did not justify my actions or argue about who was right. I simply typed 3 sentences. You all made your choices regarding my wedding. I have made mine. Enjoy your week. I hit send. Then I went into my phone settings and permanently muted the family group chat. I turned on the Do Not Disturb mode, locked the phone back in the safe, and walked out to the beach with my wife. Months passed, and the changing seasons brought a profound sense of quiet to our lives. Fall turned into winter, and Hazel and I settled into our routine as a married couple. Without the constant dark cloud of my family's drama hanging over my head, I felt lighter, more focused, and generally happier. We hosted dinners for our friends, spent holidays with Hazel's family, and slowly began to forget the chaos of the wedding fallout. Then, one random Saturday morning in early spring, there was a knock at our front door. I was in the middle of making pancakes, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt. I wiped my hands on a towel, looked through the peephole, and froze. Standing on my front porch, shifting his weight nervously from side to side, was my father. I had not spoken to him since that brief, pathetic phone call right before the wedding. I opened the door slowly. He looked older, tired, and deeply uncomfortable. He offered a weak smile and asked if he could come inside for a minute. Against my better judgment, I let him into the living room. Hazel came out of the kitchen, her arms crossed tight across her chest, her expression completely unreadable. My dad stood in the center of the room, refusing to sit down. He looked at the floor, cleared his throat, and launched into what I assume he thought was an apology. He started by saying that he really missed me. Then, immediately, the excuses began. He claimed that he had actually wanted to attend my wedding, but my mother and Peyton had been so intensely furious that he felt he had no choice but to stay home to keep the peace. He painted himself as a helpless victim, a poor guy caught in the crossfire between a stubborn son and a hysterical wife. He said he was just trying to survive the tension in the house, and he hoped I could find it in my heart to let the past go. Before I could even open my mouth, Hazel stepped forward. She did not yell, but her voice was cold as ice. She looked my father dead in the eye and dismantled his entire narrative. She told him that he was the parent, the father, the man who was supposed to protect and support his son. She pointed out that he had stood by in complete silence while his wife and daughter ran a smear campaign against me. She called out his cowardice for letting them hold his presence at our wedding hostage. She bluntly told him that choosing to stay home to avoid an argument with his wife was not keeping the peace, it was choosing a side. My dad physically shrank back. He looked at me, hoping I would rescue him from my wife's brutal honesty. I didn't. I looked at him and laid down my one condition. I told him that if he was truly sorry, and if he really wanted a relationship with me, he needed to make things right publicly. I demanded that he sit down with my mother and Peyton, tell them they were wrong, and demand they apologize for what they did. His eyes widened in panic. He immediately started shaking his head. He mumbled something about how complicated things were, how my mother's blood pressure was high, and how he didn't want to stir the pot and make things worse. That was all the confirmation I needed. He wanted my forgiveness, but he was not willing to endure a single moment of discomfort to earn it. He wanted to sweep everything under the rug so he could feel better about himself. I walked over to the front door, opened it wide, and told him that until he was ready to stand up for me, he was not welcome in my home. He walked out, his shoulders slumped, and I locked the door behind him. About 2 months after my father's pathetic visit, the dynamic suddenly shifted. The radio silence from my mother was abruptly broken. I started receiving these incredibly bizarre, casually sweet text messages from her. She would send me pictures of the family dog or links to news articles about my favorite sports teams, accompanied by messages like, "Saw this and thought of you. Hope you're having a great day." It was completely jarring. She was acting as if the last year of hostility, boycotts, and smear campaigns had never happened. Around the same time, I noticed that Peyton had quietly unblocked me on all social media platforms. She even liked a photo Hazel had posted of our new patio furniture. Hazel and I knew immediately that something was up. My family never extended olive branches unless they wanted something in return. We did not have to wait long to find out what it was. The following week, a large, heavy envelope arrived in our mailbox. It was made of thick, expensive cardstock with elegant gold foil lettering. I opened it and burst into laughter. It was a wedding invitation. Peyton was getting married. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. After skipping my wedding for a Caribbean cruise, after causing months of psychological warfare, she actually had the nerve to mail me a formal invitation to her big day. The very next evening, Julian called me. He slipped right back into his corporate mediator persona. He spoke in a low, serious tone, telling me that Peyton's wedding was a prime opportunity for the family to reset. He said that Peyton and Mom were willing to let bygones be bygones, and that all I had to do was show up to the ceremony to heal the family rift. He used words like compromise and being the bigger person. I asked him if Peyton was going to pay me $4,000 to fly a private charter jet to her wedding. He went dead silent, realizing I was throwing his exact words right back in his face. He quickly muttered that I was being petty and hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Peyton herself. It was the first direct message she had sent me in over a year. She did not apologize. She did not acknowledge her past behavior. Instead, she took the high road, adopting the tone of a gracious savior. Her message read, "I know things have been tense, but family is forever. I want you there. I am willing to forgive you for the past if you just show up and support me on my special day." She was offering to forgive me. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, genuinely amazed by her absolute lack of self-awareness. She honestly believed that her wedding was the royal event of the decade, and that I should be grateful for the chance to be in her presence again. I felt a familiar knot of anger trying to form in my chest, but this time, Hazel and I decided we were not going to play their game. We were not going to get dragged back into the endless cycle of guilt trips and arguments. We were going to shut it down completely, and we were going to do it our way. I picked up my phone and typed my response to Peyton. I kept it brief, factual, and incredibly direct. I wrote, "I thought you didn't care about inconvenient wedding dates. I won't be attending. Have a great time." I hit send. Then I took the thick, gold-foiled wedding invitation, checked the box that said joyfully declining, sealed it in the return envelope, and dropped it in the mail. The fallout was instantaneous and explosive. My mother started calling my phone back to back. When I didn't answer, she left a 3-minute voicemail, screaming through tears about how I was a vindictive, hateful person who was trying to ruin my sister's happiness out of pure spite. Julian texted me a long paragraph calling me a massive disappointment. The flying monkeys were deployed again, with obscure relatives popping out of the woodwork to message me on Facebook, telling me I was taking a grudge entirely too far. Instead of engaging, Hazel had a brilliant idea. Our own 1-year wedding anniversary was coming up, and it coincidentally fell on the exact same weekend as Peyton's wedding. Hazel pulled out her laptop, opened a travel website, and told me it was time to treat ourselves. Within an hour, we had booked a lavish, first-class anniversary trip to a stunning 5-star mountain resort. We booked a suite with a private hot tub, scheduled couples massages, and made reservations at the most expensive restaurant on the property. We spared absolutely no expense. When the weekend of Peyton's wedding arrived, we were sitting on a balcony overlooking a massive mountain range, drinking champagne in fluffy white robes. We made absolutely sure to post a few gorgeous photos of our trip on social media, simply captioning them, "Celebrating our perfect anniversary in paradise." We knew our extended family would see the posts. We knew they would show them to my mother and Peyton. And we knew exactly how much it would sting. According to the gossip that trickled back to us through Aunt Vivian, our little retaliation worked perfectly. Peyton's wedding was beautiful on the surface, but the atmosphere behind the scenes was incredibly tense. Peyton spent half of her reception fuming in her expensive dress, aggressively complaining to anyone who would listen about how her awful brother chose to go on a vacation instead of supporting her. She spent her own wedding day obsessing over my absence. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. She had made her bed a year prior when she chose a cruise over my wedding, and now she was being forced to lie in it. We spent the rest of our anniversary weekend completely unplugged, laughing, drinking wine, and celebrating the fact that we had officially outplayed their toxic games. A little over a year passed after Peyton's wedding, bringing us to a completely new chapter. Hazel and I were living a quiet, peaceful life, and that peace was about to multiply. Hazel took a test one Tuesday morning, and those 2 pink lines changed our world forever. We were pregnant with our first child. The excitement was overwhelming, but we also made a very strategic decision. We agreed right then and there that we were going to be fiercely protective of this baby's environment. We decided to keep the news an absolute secret from my side of the family. We told Hazel's parents, we told our closest friends, and we told Aunt Vivian, swearing her to secrecy. We wanted to enjoy the milestone without the inevitable dark cloud of my mother and sister hovering over us. But in families like mine, secrets never stay buried for long. When Hazel was about 5 months along, someone slipped up. A distant cousin saw a photo of Hazel at a grocery store, noticed the baby bump, and immediately called my mother. My mother's reaction was exactly what I expected, yet somehow still shocking in its cruelty. She did not call to congratulate me. She did not ask how Hazel was feeling or if we were having a boy or a girl. Instead, she sent me a venomous, scathing text message. She accused me of deliberately hiding the pregnancy to torture her. Her exact words were, "Hope you do not punish your unborn child the way you have punished your own family." Right on cue, Peyton tried to hijack the narrative. The very next day, Peyton posted a vague, dramatic update on her social media, claiming she was dealing with a sudden, terrifying medical scare and needed everyone's prayers. It was a blatant, desperate attempt to pull the family's attention back to her, ensuring no one was focusing on the news of my impending fatherhood. We ignored both of them completely. 2 months later, we hosted a massive, beautiful baby shower in our backyard. Hazel's family decorated the entire place with lights and flowers. The yard was packed with friends, colleagues, and the few relatives who actually supported us. There was laughter, great food, a ridiculous amount of gifts, and zero drama. Not a single member of my immediate family was invited, and not a single one was missed. We celebrated the upcoming arrival of our child surrounded only by people who brought positive energy into our lives. It was the ultimate victory. Time has a funny way of revealing the truth. Fast forward 3 years. Our daughter was a happy, thriving toddler, and our lives were full of joy. We had successfully maintained complete distance from my parents and siblings. But even from a distance, the news of their inevitable collapse eventually reached my ears. Word traveled through the family grapevine that Peyton's marriage was falling apart in a spectacular fashion. Apparently, rushing into a marriage based entirely on a desire for an extravagant wedding day was not a solid foundation for a lifetime commitment. They were in massive financial ruin. Peyton's complete inability to compromise, her rampant selfishness, and her habit of spending money they did not have had driven her husband to the breaking point. A messy, highly contested divorce was imminent. True to form, my mother immediately took to Facebook to spin the disaster. She wrote long, agonizing posts blaming Peyton's soon-to-be ex-husband for everything. She called him a narcissist, a manipulator, and a fraud who took advantage of Peyton's sweet, trusting heart. There was zero accountability. They were still playing the victims, just with a new target. The most surprising update, however, came from my older brother. Late one night, my phone buzzed with a message from Julian. It was the first time I had heard from him in years. The message was remarkably short, entirely stripped of his usual corporate buzzwords and manipulative phrasing. He wrote, "You were right. Mom and Peyton are toxic. I can't do this anymore." I learned from Aunt Vivian that Julian had finally experienced the reality of being the target. With me gone, the family dynamic had shifted. Peyton needed someone to blame for her miseries, and my mother needed someone to control. Julian had become their new emotional punching bag, and he had finally cracked. He was quietly distancing himself, pulling back from the Sunday dinners and the constant demands. I read Julian's message, but I did not reply. I did not feel the need to welcome him back with open arms, and I certainly did not want to get dragged into a trauma bonding session about our mother. I just felt a quiet sense of validation. He finally saw what I had seen all along. My mother, realizing her grip on the family was slipping away, attempted one final, desperate maneuver. I received an urgent phone call from Aunt Vivian. She warned me that my mother was planning a massive, surprise family reunion at a rented banquet hall. She was telling the extended family that this was going to be the grand healing moment, and she was planning to ambush me into attending so she could force a public reconciliation and play the role of the forgiving matriarch. That was the absolute final straw. I sat down at my computer, opened my email, and pulled up my phone contacts. I systematically and permanently blocked my mother, my father, Peyton, and every single relative who had ever acted as their flying monkey. I blocked their phone numbers, their email addresses, and their social media profiles. I locked down my wife's accounts as well. I built an impenetrable digital wall around my family. I realized in that moment that family is not about blood. Blood just means you share genetics. True family is about respect. It is about the people who show up for you when it is entirely inconvenient for them. It is about the people who celebrate your victories without trying to steal the spotlight, and the people who own up to their mistakes instead of blaming everyone else. I have that family now. I look at Hazel, reading a book on the couch, and I look at my daughter, playing with her blocks on the rug, and I know I have everything I could ever possibly need. I am completely, utterly free from the ghosts of my past. Looking back, walking away from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally was the hardest, yet most liberating decision of my life. I built my own family with Hazel, surrounded by people who show up when it matters, not just when it's convenient. But sometimes, late at night, I see the occasional email from an obscure relative trying to play peacemaker, asking me to just let it go for the sake of blood. So, I have to ask you all, am I the jerk for standing my ground and permanently cutting off my parents and sister, or should I have swallowed my pride and accepted their half-hearted apologies to keep the family together? Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that button and ring the bell so you never miss out on our daily family drama stories. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. See you in the next video.